to the Doing Motherhood podcast, where we talk all things Black mothers today. What's the goings on, y'all? Today is we're gonna just bring the mood. We're gonna bring the mood down to a slow pace. So today, what we will do is take a little time travel back to the 90s. The 90s is where it was at, okay? So we're gonna take a little time travel back to the 90s. We're talking about the Mary J. Blige documentary, which is called My Life on Amazon Prime. And we're gonna just try to keep things a little light, funny, airy, and go from there. I don't know about anybody else, but June has gone by entirely too fast for me. Today is the last day of June, and I'm having a really hard time reconciling this month. I just can't believe how fast it's gone. And I honestly can't remember most of the month. I know there were some births in there, and that's probably a lot of why I can't remember this month. I know my son had that big accident I talked to y'all about. I had a minor accident with my car. I woke up a couple of days ago, realized I had to be in court this morning because I had a speeding ticket. That's it. That's all it was. Nothing too serious. But court is still just a lot, right? It's the whole process of going through security and bailiffs and everything's just so serious. So if you don't mind, what I would like to do is take a moment to do a meditation. I hope that you will join with me. If you're driving, don't. If you're listening to this in your car, do not, unless you're gonna stop and pull off on the side of the road or something, right? But you can also just pause this and come back to it later. But I'd like to do a meditation that I refer to as my best day meditation. And this is a meditation I learned from a therapist some years ago. I mean, it's been a long time, over 10 years ago is when I learned this, and it still is such a vital practice for me, not on a daily basis, but when I do get into these moments of just kind of overwhelm and tripping over myself, and I find myself out of my routine, then this is one that works. If you've been following my Anya Doula page, I've done this a few times in the time that I've been doing that. So some of you may already be familiar. So let me share with you what the best day meditation is. Best day meditation is one in which you recall a moment or a day that you think of as all good, feel good, deep down in your bones, just a feel good day or a feel good moment. And so I'll share with you what that day is for me, and it plays into what we'll be talking about today. But when my therapist first suggested this day, she asked us to go back to a day that was all good, felt really good. You are pulling all of the senses that you felt from that day into your present moment so that you bring all the goodness into your present moment. And right now I could just I could use all of the feel good feelings from that day. So the day that I bring up, I must have been 12 or 13 years old. At that time, my family and I lived in Stuttgart, Germany, and my father was in the military. He's retired military. So we lived in Germany for some time. This was during the summertime, and we would find ourselves, my friends and I, into all types of adventure. So on this particular day, we'd kind of, I don't know if my friends snuck off, but I know I definitely snuck off to the pool. And we left the army base that we were living on to go to a swimming pool in a German neighborhood, which was quite a ways away. So in the base that we lived on in Stuttgart was called Robinson Barracks, and it was at the top of this like really big hill. It wasn't a mountain, but it was a big enough hill. And so we did not have transportation to get down the hill. You could walk it, but it would have been a lot to walk it. And so the first memory of that day is that my friends and I hitchhiked. We caught a ride with some German stranger down the hill. So you already know, like just summertime shenanigans from tweens and teenagers. And then we got to the end of the hill, and somebody had a moment of realization that this was a crazy thing to do. We jumped out of this poor German man's car. He cussed us out. We took off running and we went on about our day at the swimming pool. But so part of the best day meditation is pulling not only your feelings, it's not just about pulling the feel good feelings, it's about pulling that entire the entire environment. So you're thinking about what the day looked like, you're thinking about what you heard, what it sounded like, you're thinking about the people and the conversations that were going on. And so when I pull this memory up, I actually think of the end of the day and when we were going home. It was sunset and the sky was like that perfect mix of purple and orange and pink and, just those beautiful hues. And we were walking down the street, hair wet and messed up. Ashy because we had been in the pool all day, towels wrapped around us, just being kids and having that feeling of freedom and having your day to yourself and spending with your friends. And so when I do this meditation, and as you do this meditation, I want you to think about what that day is for you and think about all of the feelings. So we'll take a moment here. We'll give you all a second to get into a position that you're comfortable in, whether you're sitting down, if you want to lie down, get your mood right, get your lighting right, whatever you need to do. And we're going to take just a few deep breaths. I have everyone in the studio doing this with me. I hope they are. I don't know if they really are. So we're going to take just a couple of deep breaths in your nose. Let it out. Another good deep breath. Let it out. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. I will close my eyes. And so as you are settling into your space and pulling up that memory of your best day, I want you to just relax your body. Start with your head, relax your eyebrows. Let your tongue fall to the bottom of your mouth. Relax your jaw and your shoulders. I like to do a little shimmy sometimes. Take another good breath in. And so start thinking about your day. And first I want you to focus on what you see, what's happening in the environment. What colors are prominent and stand out? If you were among people, who were the people there who added to the feelings, right? And just those really good, feel-good emotions of the day. What was going on that day? Where were you? And then I want you to think about the sounds. What did you hear? Is there a lot of laughter? Is it quiet and peaceful? Do you hear animal sounds, nature sounds, beach sounds? And really just let those sounds and what you see sink into every cell of your body and radiate all those feelings throughout. And then I want you to think about what you were thinking on that day. Were you excited? Were you anxious? Was it a calm day? Happiness, elation? And I want you to see all those feelings just like coursing through your veins, filling up your lungs as you take a deep breath. Filling the space around you as you exhale. And let it all become a part of your present moment. And when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes. And just kind of sit with it. We'll take 3 deep breaths together. In your nose, we'll exhale slowly. Last deep breath. There we go. Shake it all off. Get into it, right? All right. So one of the things that when I think about what I heard on that day, and I think that's what brings back, probably what brings back the most joy, was just my friends and I walking down the street, being free, you know, that summertime, sun, glow, fun in the sun, feeling, a lot of laughter, a lot of playing around in the street. But what I hear and what I always hear is Jodeci's Diary of a Mad Man because that album had just dropped and that was all we were listening to that entire summer. And so Jodeci, ooh, Mr. Devontae Swing. I won't get all the way into it, but that is definitely part of the soundtrack. That is definitely part of the soundtrack of that summer. So I hope that meditation helps. Like I said, that is one that when I have these moments of just overwhelm or feeling like I'm like moving 10 steps faster than I can really keep up with, I will find myself in my car or, you know, in my room at home or just wherever I can grab a quiet moment of solitude and give myself, you know, 3 to 5 minutes of just reflecting on that. And it really does boost your mood and brings those really good feelings into the present moment so you can just sink into that. So I hope that helps. Let me know. you can leave it on the comments. We are going to go ahead and get into the main topic for today. But before I do that, I'm going to ask you, like I always ask you, when you're listening to the podcast, I would greatly appreciate if you would like, share, subscribe to the podcast, and leave us a review. Leave a review so that I know if you're feeling this, or let me know what things you'd like to hear about. So thank you to all of you who have already done that. I am definitely seeing a little uptick in numbers, and there's a lot of traffic coming to the podcast. So I'm so appreciative to you for listening and tuning in every week and being a part of this community. Thank you. All right, so speaking of the 90s, this is the topic today. I'm so excited about this topic because there's been a recent flux of documentaries based on some of my favorite musical artists from the 90s, and my 90s tween and teen heart is just like bubbling over with nostalgia and just reminiscing about those days. And especially now that it's summertime, right? Like summertime during that age was just always, it was the freedom of being a teenager in the summer, the freedom of being able to just hang out with your friends, and at that age especially, because your parents kind of let go, or at least my parents let go a little bit, so we had a little bit of breathing room and could kind of plan our own days and just have the time of our lives. I tell my children all the time that I hate that they missed the 90s. They roll their eyes at me. I tell them I really hate that y'all missed the 90s because you missed the dopest decade. Well, I tell Bryce that because Bryce is the younger one, so he was not here in the 90s. Jahari was here for the second half of the 90s, and he swears he remembers it all. We'll see. We don't. I don't know if he really remembers all of it, but it was definitely a good time. I owe my G status to the 90s. I'm a whole G. If you didn't know, you'll find out soon enough. No, so I want to talk about the Mary J. Blige documentary called My Life. It's on Amazon Prime if you haven't already checked that out. So here's your spoiler alert. I am going to do my best not to give the entire documentary away because that's not my goal. But I'm also not going to do a whole lot to cover up all the things, right? So if you have not watched the My Life documentary on Amazon Prime and you don't want to hear anything spoiled because you want to see, hey, this is your moment to pause, exit stage left. If you haven't watched it, I don't want to spoil it for you, but I'm going to talk about it. So take care of yourself and do whatever you need to do. And I hope you'll come back later to listen to it after you watch it and share with us on the Instagram page. So Miss Mary J. Blige, y'all, so first of all, Mary J. Blige is so much of my childhood. And it's something that I've, of course, we know it, but I think, I just had kind of gotten away from what she meant and the major impact that she's had. We've had Mary at this point for going on 30 years, almost 30 years that we've known her, that she's had this amazing career, a reigning career, right? She reigns always as the queen of hip hop soul. And so it was just really nice to see this documentary done around her. It's her. She's in the documentary. She's talking. This is her sharing her story along with the major players who who helped her on the production of the My Life album. So, of course, Puff, as I will always refer to him, but Diddy. Puff was in the documentary sharing. Andre Harrell, rest his soul. This was obviously being filmed before his passing last year. And so it was just a real good throwback to the 90s, a real good throwback to a time when things felt a whole lot simpler. 1992 was the year that What's the 411 drop. That was her debut album. And at that time, R&B was still mostly soul music, or it was all soul music at that time. If you were around at that time, you may recall that R&B singers dressed up. They were still coming off of that like Motown feel and that Motown era. And so we saw singers dressed up. They were in glam, whether that was, on their album covers, in their video shoots, when we saw them on stage. Everything was about the glam. Everything was about that diva status for the women R&B singers, right? And wearing beautiful gowns on stage and in their music videos. So think Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, In Vogue, Anita Baker, Shantae Moore even. There were so many more that I'm sure I'm forgetting, but those are the few that stick out to me in that moment just before Mary J. Blige hit the scene. So hip hop was new and it was taking over the streets and it was taking over the hearts of the youth, but R&B was definitely gatekeeping to keep hip hop away. They did not like the rappers. This was the time that like churches were hosting. This was the time that churches were hosting like what are those CD smashing, I don't know what to call them, but the churches, like the pastors would like call their congregations and they would video themselves like I say steamroll, but they had like some type of tractor vehicle that would just like roll over all the CDs. And I remember at that time we were like, they so stupid. They spent all that money to buy those CDs just so they could roll them over. Or they were, so it's just like a lot happening around hip hop. And those of us who were young were all for it. It was definitely the music of our youth. I remember my dad could not stand anything that had to do with rap. He didn't want it in the house. He didn't want us playing it. There were many moments of my brothers and I, our CDs being tossed in the trash. If he heard, the one I remember specifically was The Chronic. My brother messed around, left the Chronic CD in my dad's stereo. He turned it on. It was blasting. That was the end of that. There was no more rap in the house, right? So anyway, hip hop was not respected as a genre at that time. Then comes Mary J. Blige kicking in the gate with her combat boots and wearing her jerseys, and she was glammed up, but she was glammed up in street style, right? She didn't come out wearing the big poofy hair. She didn't come out wearing slinky ball gowns. Like, she was wearing jerseys and combat boots, and I love that in the documentary, Misa Hilton, who was her stylist at the time, was in the documentary to talk about the styling that she chose for Mary J. Blige and how it spoke to those of us who didn't really see ourselves in those R&B singers because everything was so like diva and big and glam and definitely for the TV and definitely for the cameras, but not really for like our home and not for our schoolyards and the streets, right? And so when Mary J. Blige came, it was really like she literally kicked in the door. She literally kicked in the door for those of us who grew up a little more rough around the edges, for those of us who grew up a little more, with a little more swag. A little more hip hop swag. I had to be in 6th or 7th grade. I can't remember exactly. I was in 6th or 7th grade when that came out, and she was nothing like the singers that my mom usually played around the house, but she was singing like the singers that my mom played around the house. And a little bit of background, my mother is an entertainer. She is a singer. And so at that time, my mom was building up her reputation as a singer in the community that we were in. There were often talent shows being hosted on the Army base, and you could win prize money and like win some really good prize money at that. And so my mom was all about Mary J. Blige. Okay, that's What's the 411 album played in our house nonstop. She was always always playing it over and over and over again so that she could hit it right and add her own flair to it. And so I just remember those days being in the house singing Mary J. Blige all day, every day. And then my mom would have these talent shows that she would, take us along to, and we'd watch her and everybody else compete. My mother always won. She did. She always won the prizes because she is an amazing singer. And she always won with Mary J. Blige. So it was, watching this documentary was absolutely a trip back down memory lane. She was everywhere. Mary J. Blige was everywhere. And while she didn't she came in as her own person, right? And she was pretty solid from the beginning, right? Like when she came in, everybody was on it. But we definitely saw the change after her, right? She opened up the door for artists like TLC, Total. Who are some of the others? TLC, Total, later down the road, Sierra, SWV. It was all just, I'm about to cry, y'all. I'm about to cry. This is the other thing about the Army bases. Like, they had youth centers and they had teen centers. And this was where I was phasing out of the youth center phase and going into the teen center phase. And they would have these dances on the weekends. And so it was like these after school dance parties, or after school, after school, our friends, we would like be on the schoolyard making up all these choreography dances to the music, so that when we went to the party, when we went to the teen party, we'd have our routines down, right? It was just a really good time. I remember like our mothers they started wearing the makeup that Mary J. Blige was wearing, especially with the lip liner. Y'all remember what it was like, the lip liner and the dark lipstick, right? I remember, this is also around the time, 1992, I believe, is when the film Malcolm X, Spike Lee's Malcolm X came out. And so that was that time that everyone was wearing those Negro League baseball shirts. I remember I had one, I don't remember the team, but I had a Negro League baseball shirt, and I had a Malcolm X styled baseball shirt, and would wear my hat to the back like Mary J. Blige would, right? And with my leggings and all that good stuff. It just was a good time. Listening to her albums as I cleaned the house. And while it was a good time with friends, it was a good time for the culture. At home, it was an emotionally tumultuous time for our family. So my escape when things got really heavy at home was to turn that stereo on and just blast. And I would sing her songs as hard and as powerfully as I, imagined that she was singing as hard and as powerfully as I would see my mother singing as she, put her own spin on these songs. Um, Mary J. Blige definitely fit in with the rappers more than she fit in with the R&B singers. And it just, it was a feeling of being seen for Black girls and Black women in a way that felt a lot more real to us than what we may have seen in some of the other singers prior to her showing up. And so it was that grittiness, and it was, the fact that we could feel all of her burdens come through the music and touch us, and without knowing the details of her story, right? Without knowing the details of her life, but knowing that we knew her because she was singing what we all knew about ourselves. And I think it was Taraji who was also, sharing her point of view in the documentary, but I think it was her that said that she gave like that Black girl a name and a face and humanized us for the world to see. Another really fun fact was that my first concert was Mary J. Blige off of that album. And I can't remember, I don't know that she came to the city that we were in or if we had to drive. Usually for concerts, we had to drive to another city, if I remember correctly. But my mom offered to take me and a couple of friends. And so my dad also came along because, he wasn't about that rap business. And if anything, I'm sure felt or sounded like it was going to be too out of hand, he would have dragged everybody out of the concert. But we did. We got to stay. It's one of my favorite memories of just being, going to my first concert, sharing that moment with my friends and sharing that moment with my parents. We had a good time. Jodeci did make their appearance. So I was like, in love, singing on my Jodeci songs and hoping that like Devontae Swing would see me from the stage, right? I was so in love with that man. It doesn't make any sense. But that is what all of that came back in watching this documentary and just thinking about who I was at that time, what was going on at that time. And one thing about Mary is that she has always been transparent about her trials and tribulations, right? And so that is the focus of this documentary is what she was going through when she wrote the My Life album. If y'all remember the My Life album, there were so many bangers on that one, but it was also that album that was just like, she was pouring everything. She was pouring everything into those lyrics, and then not just the lyrics, but then, the way that her voice carried all of that pain. And I think that that's what, I don't want to glorify pain. And the documentary does not glorify the pain either, just so you know. So we're not like, it's not trauma porn. I'll say that. It's definitely a triumphant documentary. We see her growth, but that was the focus so that we could understand why that album was as impactful as it was for Black women. So yeah, she's always been very transparent about her trials and tribulations, but there was definitely a focus in this documentary in carrying or growing through those trials and tribulations and healing what was going on. And so she talks a lot about how as painful as that album was, and even the people around her, Puff, some of the, sound engineers, the other writers on the album, they also share that, like, all of them were in that space of healing. They had all been going through something really deep and just experiencing really hard feelings at a time when they were young, still learning themselves, in this music business, but in it in a way that, they were creating a lane that no one else had created at that time. So they were just looking to, all of them were looking to make a name for themselves. And I think it's just beautiful. I think it's beautiful to see how when you have a group of people who really care about you and you're all working toward a common goal, and so you're caring about each other and taking care of one another in that space. I think that was something that definitely stood out to me, was the way that they all took care of her, with the understanding of where she came from and why she was having a lot of the feelings that she was having, and just where she was in her own growth as a young woman, as a young Black woman, right? And now turning into this mega superstar, but without the training and the the training and the grooming that a lot of singers at that time grew up with. If you think about Whitney Houston, you think about Mariah Carey, Janet Jackson, right? All of the big names at that time, they had been singing since they were little kids. And the documentary points out that while Mary had been singing since a little kid, she was singing in the house. She was singing the songs that her mother was playing, right? She was singing, not in a church choir where she was getting vocal lessons. She even says that, like, she just wanted to emulate what her mother loved so much, because she wanted to impress her mother. Beyond talking about the pain, she also, I'll say this, she does not specifically speak about her healing journey. And if you've been following, right, if you've been a fan of Mary J. Blige for all of these years, we know, like, what albums, we can chart her course of healing, and when she started to, her music changed from being like those mostly deeply painful, sorrowful songs into more uplifting songs of self-confidence. And self-care isn't a term that we were using at that time, but now we talk about it as self-care. And so, highlighting what was good in her life. But in this documentary, I love how creatively they document her healing. If you've ever done like healing work, whether it's with a therapist or counselor, or even if just digging into self-help books, right? Because all of us, we might not all have the resources to get to therapy, but there's always some way, right? And I just recall at one point, around the time that I learned this best day meditation, is when my therapist was introducing to me this idea of healing my inner child. Now, let me tell you, and I laugh with her about it all the time now, but she started talking to me about this inner child work, and I was like, okay, I was all for it. Like, whatever to make me feel better, right? Whatever I need to do to feel better and get through these tough feelings and get through this tough time, I'll do it. And so she starts explaining to me inner child healing, and I'd read a little bit about it in one of Iyanla Vanzant's books, and I just wasn't quite getting it from the book, right? So my therapist brings it up and she says, so what you're going to do is imagine yourself as, 7-year-old Anya when certain situations happened that I was still trying to work through. And then you're going to imagine yourself as 14-year-old Anya. And if you've listened back to some of the old episodes of this podcast, you know that I was a very young teenager when I had my first son. And so going back to that age, and in what we're doing when we're doing inner child work to heal is taking care of the needs of that inner child. This is what I heard at that time. I heard, talk to your imaginary self. Right? Talk to your imaginary self. And so she shared with me what to do, and I was just like, listen, I'm not gonna be in my head talking to imaginary people, right? Like that, I'm not in for that. Like if you tell me to keep coming to therapy and you give me like worksheets or whatever, I'll do that. I will meditate, but I'm not gonna be talking to imaginary versions of myself. And so I did not do it. I did not follow the assignment. I did not do it. But what I found later on in my healing journey is that I got to a place where that started to happen automatically, where I started to automatically think about what was triggering me in this moment and where the feelings are really coming from, right? And realizing that it was little 7-year-old Anya who was feeling this moment here, right? And so what do I need to do to take care of her? Or it was 14-year-old Anya who's having a hard time processing, or it's 14-year-old Anya who's coming out because I had a hard time processing what I didn't get to process when I was 14 years old, right? So all of that is part of inner child healing, and I appreciated in this documentary the way they demonstrated it without like giving us a crash course lesson, like I almost just did for y'all, right? Giving a crash course lesson. And what we see is as Mary J. Blige talks about who she was as a little girl and how important her mother was to her, and some of the singers who she was trying to emulate at that time when she was singing as a little girl. They show an animation of a small Mary J. Blige, right? And then they show that animation grows with her, and then we see the Mary J. Blige in animation who was this quiet, shy teenager who was just trying to go unnoticed so that she could, keep her head down and stay on the straight and narrow and not get caught up in the things that were going on in her neighborhood. And then we see her audition as her teenage self, right? And so it's just so creative, and I thought it was so brilliant of whoever the creative directors were in telling and sharing her story, that they incorporated that into the documentary without it being like a lesson, right, on inner child healing. So it's beautiful to see kind of that full circle moment. And I think one of the things that was the biggest takeaway for me in watching this documentary is the way that Mary J. Blige talked about her protecting those smaller selves. So she talks about, and these are stories. There wasn't anything in the documentary that was like a big reveal, right? It's the same stories that she has shared with us through the years. And so we had known before that she was molested when she was 5 years old, right? And so she talks about how the Mary that she is now, as she is her fully evolved and healed self, right? And she several times she would say, I didn't know then that I was who I am today, that she had no clue at that age. And when she was going through all of the trouble, that who she really was is exactly who she is today. This amazing Grammy Award winning singer, right? Who's had a brilliant career that has been, it's been a steadfast career. You know, we've seen so many people come and go, and we've seen so many artists who have shared their trials and tribulations over these years. We've seen them like hit rock bottom and try to come back, and some of them do and some of them don't. But I think it's just a testament to her courage, and her courage in staying on a path to be her best self, and staying on to be her best self. And I don't know that it was ever her goal. It doesn't, this isn't something that she conveyed during the documentary, but her courage in sharing her story has carried so many of us through a lot of our own really big trials and tribulations. And so anyway, the part that stuck with me the most was that now that she is who she is, that she is still doing work to take care of her little selves, right? So she still takes care of 5-year-old Mary, and she still takes care of the very young Mary, the Mary that we met, right? That 18, 19-year-old girl who was shy and just trying to figure her way out, her way through this new process of stardom and fame and just a really fast life, but knowing that she always had a goal of helping her family, saving her family, pulling her family out of the projects, and just being the best person that she can be. And I can't think of many artists of our time who demonstrate that arc for us. And yeah, I left that documentary realizing how much love I've always had for her, and how grateful I am for her being an example of courage, and her being an example of transparency and vulnerability, and doing that in the most down-ass Black girl way. So I encourage you to, it wasn't supposed to get heavy, shoot. I was supposed to, keep it light and airy, like I said in the beginning, but it's all good. I encourage you to watch that documentary and just think about where you are, right? Like, and that's one of the other things is that, like, I've been doing this healing work and, just trying to grow into my best self for so many years, and also realizing that, like, that journey really doesn't ever end, that it is an ongoing process of being vulnerable. It's an ongoing process of pulling the courage out of yourself, and the will to do it, to put in the work, and so that we can get to that place, right? So that we can get to that place that she told us she's at, where she can now realize exactly who she is and who she's always been, but didn't know it at the time. And so, yeah, reminisce. Reminisce is like my favorite Mary J. Blige song of all time. I always go back to What's the 411. That's always going to be my favorite album. It's always going to be, yeah, if we pull up karaoke, Reminisce is the song I'm singing. So go to IG at doing underscore motherhood underscore podcast. I would love to hear your thoughts about the documentary. I would love to hear, just your thoughts and your feelings about what it means to be on that healing journey, what path you're on, and like who helps you get through it, who helps you get through it, what helps you get through it. Like I said, anytime I can go back to the 90s, anytime I can go back to the 90s is a good time, because that was that moment of freedom and creativity. It was just uninhibited, right? There was no one or nothing at that time that told me what I couldn't do or what I couldn't be or any of that. Like, the world was our oyster, and I wanted to, I just wanted to be in that for a little bit and go back and remember who I was then and reflect on how far I've come since then, and I can be proud of it. I'm absolutely proud of what I'm doing now, and I hope that you can say the same. So come on over to the podcast. Let us know what you think of the documentary. Let us know where you are on your own healing journey. And yeah, I wish the best for all of you. I think that's it.